Hi, welcome back to my channel. I have another series review for you today. This one has the 6 books that you'll see in the Veronica Speedwell series, and I will discuss each book, and they are A Curious Beginning, A Murderous Relation, A Treacherous Curse, A Dangerous Collaboration, A Perilous Undertaking, and An Unexpected Peril. So I love these book covers, and I want to tell you why I end up getting this series for review. And it was because on NetGalley, as I peruse the various titles that are coming up for review, I couldn't help but be attracted to I'm sorry, just almost shut my tablet off. I couldn't help but be attracted to the cover. And I know that, we try to say that don't judge a book by its cover, but I have to admit that this cover intrigued me. So I went to my friend Fashawn, who is WTFIU Reading, and I said, have you ever heard of Deanna Raybourn? I think I might like this book. What do you think? And she's started raving about this author, Deanna Raybourn, and the series, which is the Veronica Speedwell series. And so after talking to her a couple of times, I knew I just had to have this book. And so I went and I got the first 5 books as audiobooks, and then I had the last book here that we'll discuss as digital books. So let's get into this combined series review. Who is Veronica Speedwell? She is an orphan woman who was raised as an orphan by her spinster aunts, and after her oldest aunt passed away, Veronica took on the life as an adventurer. She became what's called a lepidopterist. I hope I'm saying that right. Let me try this again. Lepidopterist, and that is a butterfly hunter or collector, an expert in the field of butterflies. Now, she is about to take on another voyage or journey, and she's almost abducted. Now, there's something else I want to tell you about Veronica before I go into each individual book. This is pretty much a cozy mystery series. A cozy mystery is basically when you have an amateur sleuth who has the adept skill at solving crimes, including murder. But this book has a little bit of an extra edge because this character, Veronica, she is adventurous. I think I've already used that word, but she's also a very modern woman in her own right. And another factor about this book is the series begins in London, 1887. So it's also a Victorian era book, and with it being a something set in the Victoria era, it becomes more like a historical fiction / historical cozy mystery. So Veronica is almost abducted, and she gets saved by someone who is a German baron, and he begins to tell her certain things about certain aspects of her life. And I'm going to leave some blanks in here, some gaps in these reviews, because I don't want to spoil this any of these books for you. And at some point I should have told you that I'm talking about the first book in the series. So when I edit this, I will have the cover up on the screen. So that's why the title is A Curious Beginning. It's the first book in this series where Veronica becomes an amateur sleuth, so to speak. So someone is trying to abduct Veronica, and this, as I mentioned, this baron steps in, saves her, begins to tell her certain things about her life and her past. And when he does that, she starts to feel secure in his presence. So he kind of asks her to accompany him on a train ride. He takes her under his protection, but he doesn't do this alone. He takes her to someone who actually owed him a favor, owed him a debt, and that man's name is Stoker Templeton Vane. He takes her to Stoker and says, here, you owe me this favor. I need you to protect this woman, Veronica. So Stoker is none too pleased with this woman showing up in his life at this time. Now, Stoker, as we learn in the first book, lived in pretty much a dilapidated warehouse. But it wasn't an empty warehouse. It was full of interesting things that really caught Veronica's attention. And everything there played into the fact that Stoker is a natural historian. What is it? I can't think of the word. I know I get fiber fog all the time. But when you taxidermy, he's also a taxidermist. And so he's got all kinds of interesting things in his lair, so to speak. And it's these interesting things that kind of make Veronica feel a certain affinity to him and trust that he will keep her safe while the Baron seeks a clue as to why she was abducted. But things don't go as planned, because the next morning, either later that night or the very next morning, the Baron is found murdered. And Stoker is angry. He's like, as far as I'm concerned, that murder has to have something to do with you. So she's like, oh, I got to get out of here. First, somebody tries to kidnap me. Now this man that I never met before is murdered because somehow he was connected to me. But no, Stoker does not let her go. He pretty much grabs her by the wrist and says, no, we're going to figure this out. And I'm not letting you out of my sight until we figure out what happened to the Baron. That's how their relationship began. It was a very contemptuous, bitter relationship at first. They resented each other for their own individual reasons, and it was just a great start to what I found to be a thrilling series. And as you saw in the beginning image in this video, I'm going to be talking about each book, so you know that I had to have thoroughly enjoyed it if I read all 6 books. And by the way, I read all 6 books in 2.5 days, so that's how good the series was. Now, the question comes at play is, was her near abduction and the Baron's murder connected? And we begin to learn about Veronica's past. Very, very, very specific information about her past. And there might even be in this first book a little bit of information about who Stoker is, and the fact that he composes himself as a gentleman, whether it's the affectations of his speech, whether it's his mannerisms. Veronica knows that this man is indeed a gentleman with proper upbringing, but why is he living in a dilapidated warehouse, stuffing animals and developing, he's working on an elephant actually in this first book. So that was the way that I got to meet Veronica and Stoker. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I acquired the first 5 books, and I think I said that I got them as audiobooks. And I want to mention that because Angela Masters narrated all of the audiobooks, and she had great pacing, excellent speech, whether it was Veronica, whether it was Stoker, whether it was the Baron when he was in the first scenes of the story, whether it was other characters. She did a fabulous job and made listening to this series a true delight. So that is the first book, A Curious Beginning. Now we're going to move on to the next book in the series, and that book is A Perilous Undertaking, Book 2 in the Veronica Speedwell series. And I know I didn't say it earlier, but I gave A Curious Beginning 4 stars, and I'm also giving A Perilous Undertaking 4 stars as well. Now, in this book, by the time this book rolls around, we will have seen that Veronica and Stoker are quite adept at getting to the bottom of things, at getting to the truth of things, and solving crimes, including murders. Now, as we get into this book here, we see that Lady Sundridge, who runs a ladies-only establishment that's called the Curiosity Lab, asks Veronica to save a man that's destined to be hung. Well, what happened here? Well, we learned that someone, his name was Miles Ramsforth, was a patron of the club and had sought out the services of one of the women in the club. Well, this woman has been murdered, and Ramsforth is found cradling her body. So since he's found with the body, a court of his peers has deemed him guilty of murder and has sentenced him to be hung. The judge has sentenced him to be hung, and within, I think, 6 days, this hanging is about to take place. So Lady, what is her name again? Lady Sundridge begs of Veronica, and by association Stoker, to get behind who the true killer of this woman was, and to save Ramsforth from the noose. Now, in the first book, we found out secrets of Veronica's past were revealed. In the second book here, we learn that Lady, I gotta look up her name every time, Lady Sundridge also has secrets from her past, and those secrets are unraveled, are revealed, and we get to learn about who Lady Sundridge is and why she's so keen on getting Ramsforth freed from or exonerated from that murder. So I love that I put in my review, will Veronica and Stoker be able to unravel the web of confusing facts before time runs out for Ramsforth? In that, I don't know why I used that line, but I wanted to relay that in this review. Now, in the process of trying to investigate this, they find themselves knee-deep into a community that is hid from most, because it's kind of like a secret bohemian type of community. And at this point, already in book 2, we see how well Veronica and Stoker get on. They bicker, they plot, they look at scenarios. So it's like putting puzzle pieces together. But then there's something between them that shows a web of sexual tension being woven tighter and tighter. And I love how they work together, and how the continuity of the series starts to play out even just in the second book. And again, I mentioned in my written review how I really appreciated Angela Masters as a narrator. But in this book, we have an American who pops in on the scene, and it's really cool to see how this narrator, who's already doing the various voices, also does the American accent. So we're going to move on to the third book in the series, and that is A Treacherous Curse. And that one here is giving us a little bit more in the background of Stoker's past. Now, we've already explored Veronica, her past, her parentage, her history, and now we learn that Stoker had an associate that went on an expedition with him earlier, even to the point of being Stoker's expedition partner. Well, this individual has vanished, as well as a precious diadem that has vanished, that has disappeared. So Veronica and Stoker begin to work with another historian who is putting together an exhibition, and he needs that diadem to make the exhibition complete. Well, will they be able to get to the bottom of that, along with dealing with events from Stoker's past, and even meeting his brothers and seeing how his brothers play into his life? Well, all of that is explored in the third book of the series. And I made a note in my review that this book ticks off a lot of boxes for me. I love cozy mysteries. I love Victorian novels. I love characters who are destined to be together but have insurmountable obstacles in their path. And then I love intriguing stories. So this one, like I said, it ticked all the boxes. It made it a really great read. And there was one other thing. It's real history being mixed in the pages of this book, which is obviously fiction. So I love Deanna Raybourn, and I loved this book. Now we're moving on to A Dangerous Collaboration, which looks like I gave this one 5 stars. And here in this book, well, we already met Tiberius in a previous book in the series, and Tiberius was Stoker's brother, and he was a constant and unrepentant flirt. Excuse me, a piece of cat hair. He was a constant and unrepentant flirt, and now he asks Veronica to accompany him to a remote island in Cornwall, and there's a very specific reason. I have to talk a little bit more to see if I'm going to tell you that reason, and I just may. Yeah, I guess I will. So he asks Veronica to accompany him, but he's going to the home of, where is he going? To Lord Malcolm Romilly. Now, Malcolm Romilly is a peer, and an esteemed peer at that. So Tiberius says to Veronica, you must act as if you're my fiance, because we have to maintain propriety during our travels to this Cornwall island. So she agrees. Now, meanwhile, Stoker is kind of in the background, a little bit peeved, because by now we can see that Veronica and Stoker really like each other, because, you know, we're talking about what, the third book in the series, or the fourth book by now. So he actually shows up at that Cornwall castle. So Tiberius, if he had any ideas about making a move on Veronica, well, Stoker's right there front and center to say it ain't so. It's not going to happen. So this book, okay, so that's a complete thought. I'm sorry, I paused as if I was going to expound on that thought more, but I'm not. What I like about this book is it's truly the most Victorian type book of the 6 books in the series, at least in my opinion. Now, this book has everything. It has eccentric characters. It has somebody coming into the scene that might not have been there otherwise. It has ghastly music or ghostly music. It has a huge castle with too many rooms to count. It has you have darkness, dampness, darkness. It even has a seance in this book, and I just love that. But let's find out why Veronica and Tiberius and now Stoker are at this castle. Well, Romilly got married 3 years previously, and on his wedding day, after the vows had taken place, his bride disappeared, completely vanished. Well, we find out that Romilly wants to find out once and for all what happened to his bride, and I will leave that there. I don't want to go into it any further, because if I do, I might put in a spoiler. But I will tell you that there's a lot at stake. Secrets of the past just might be revealed, and even Veronica begins to attract unwanted attention, and at the same time she's getting closer and closer to Stoker. As a matter of fact, his feelings really come into play in this book, and I think because of that transition is why I gave this one 5 stars. And I guess that's about it. I want to be as vague as possible, because I want to encourage you to go read the series yourself. And if I haven't already said it, each book in the series can indeed work as standalone novels, because enough history is given in each book to help the reader to fully understand what's going on. Then we move on to the 5th book in the series, which is A Murderous Relation. And this one is where Prince Albert Victor is tied into a local club, and he left a gift with one of the club's members that if it's tied back to Prince Albert Victor, it could bring the monarchy to its knees. So Veronica is asked to step in and try to acquire or locate this missing jewel before the royal family is disturbed. Meanwhile, Jack the Ripper, who we got a wisp of in a previous book, is roaming about in the background, making the streets of London quite dangerous. And that kind of factors into this story. Now, something else that factors into this story is Veronica knows that Prince Albert is actually her half-brother, her stepbrother. I think I put stepbrother in my review, but I go back because he's her half-brother. So this is made clear in earlier books in the series, but again, it could serve as a standalone, but it's Veronica's connection to the royal family that is a scandal that they tried to avoid in the past, and now there's something else that comes out that could be indeed a scandal, and so they work with this club and they go undercover and they try to find out where this diadem or gift or jewel was left by Prince Albert Victor, so that the monarchy is not embarrassed. So, it's a great book, whether it's the plot, the characters, the pacing, and the conclusion. It all comes together to create a great book. Then the last book in this series is An Unexpected Peril, and this book has just recently been released, March 2nd. And I gave A Murderous Relation 4 stars, by the way, because I wanted to tell you that I gave this book, An Unexpected Peril, 5 stars. So 2 out of the 6 books in the series I felt were 5-star worthy books. Now, it's 2 years later. It's January of 1889, and Veronica and Stoker have been given residence so that they can work on something like a museum that will come out into the future. So they're between these cases of murder and abductions and secrets come their work for the museum. Now, as far as that is concerned, it becomes a soul-searching book for me. Veronica starts to look at her own motives in doing things. Stoker is looking at his motives, and he's also looking at her motives. I'm trying to hurry up because my blood sugar is dropping. Now, we learn in this book that in the previous book, that Veronica was offered a membership in a ladies only club, and she did accept this membership. Well, what's interesting about this is that there's something happens about that missing jewelry jewel that Veronica is trying to help locate. But there's also a secondary story where a lady named Alice Baker Green, who was a mountain climber, she fell to her death, and so the question becomes whether or not her death was accidental or intentional. So in order for them to find this jewel, and also the fact that a treaty needs to be signed, Veronica needs to impersonate a princess. So her attention is divided. Can she successfully impersonate the Princess of Appenwald while at the same time finding out what happened to Alice Baker Green? And then whether the two could possibly be connected in any way whatsoever. So obviously, Veronica and Stoker are going to face life-threatening, dangerous situations again, just as they had before. And in my mind as a reader, I felt like I had this pleasure of roving around in this Victorian era setting, whether it was a castle in Cornwall, whether it was in Applewold, whether it was across the English Channel, whether it was in the heart of London, whether it was in a stinky, rotten castle. It didn't matter. It was just a place to be where I was completely caught into the story. But this story had another edge that really, really resonated with me. I don't know if I want to use the word resonate, but really warmed my heart. And that's where Max started to reveal even deep on a deeper level his feelings for Veronica. And I felt like he waxed poetic like no one else has. And I loved his expressions. I love the fact that Veronica is a vivacious, intelligent, sharp-witted, straightforward woman, a woman who knows her needs and goes after her needs with vigor and vim. And then you have Stoker, the stalwart, stoic hug of a man, but this man has a heart and his emotions. I love the way his emotions came through. Now, I mentioned earlier about why I took this book, and it was truly the cover that really appealed to me. But it was it was the cover that appealed to me, but it made me go and look for all of those other books. And then I got to binge read them in just a couple of days. I feel for people who, like me now, are reading books that are just coming out now. So you have to wait a year between every book. So now for book 7, I have to wait 6-8 months for that book to come out. But I love this one. I read this one as an electronic ARC, and I was so glad to grab all 5 previous books in this series. And because this was an electronic book, I do want to thank Berkeley and NetGalley for this ARC, because it gave me the opportunity to read this cozy mystery adventure series and to meet 2 characters that I truly enjoyed. So that's it for the Unexpected Peril, the 6th book in this Deanna Raybourn series. And it will be putting the links for all of the books in the description below. And I think I will probably link the blog post in case you want to read any of these reviews. And when the next book in the series comes out, I'll be sure to grab a hold of it. So that's it for now. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.